I would like to actually bring up the topic about, the Tibetan card. Does India have a Tibetan card to play? I mean, there is criticism that we've given refuge to all of these 150,000 Tibetans, and we haven't been treating other refugees as well, such as the Rohingyas. But we haven't actually, I mean, the Rohingyas are the Rohingyas, but should we, is there a possibility that India could play the Tibetan card?
I don't know. Mr. Mathur should be able to tell you more about this because he has dealt with the subject. I was never responsible for any issues on Tibet. I'm not a Tibet expert. But to my understanding, we do have a policy, it seems that, but that policy is about, looking after the His Holiness Dalai Lama. Since 1959, he is respected, and there is a program, there is a policy, there are commitments for his welfare, for the welfare of his people. But to say that we have a card, Tibet card, I don't know where is that card. I don't see that card at all, because if it has to be a card, then we must play that card. I have not seen, even lately in the case of Galwan incident with China, there was no talk about Tibet card being used vis-a-vis China or whatever that in the border conflict or whatever conflict that we have with the Chinese. So I think instead we tell the Tibetans to keep quiet. That's not your subject. You've been here for non-political activities. So it's purely religious reasons that we have His Holiness Dalai Lama in India. But if somebody wants to make this as a big card, then we must have a policy, as you rightly said, and that policy must be defined on the basis of India's national interest. Now, is Tibet India's core national interest? I don't know. I know that Kashmir is our core national interest. You and me can die for Kashmir, for the protection of Kashmir. But to say that I will have to die for Tibet, I'll have to think twice. So it is that kind of a policy thinking that we require, and I don't see that. No Indians
So
are going to die
how
for
should
Tibet.
we deal with China? Because I mean, you have a
No, no,
very,
China is a different issue. The dealing with China, I
on the
do not,
Tibet issue, I meant.
I personally, I do not see China as a bad or China is good, as most Indians do that. I think whether China is good or bad is depending on your ability to deal with China. If you cannot deal with China, China can be problematic. If you are able to deal with the Chinese, then we can have some understanding with the Chinese. My understanding is that there are no good sinologists here. We do not understand the Chinese. The Chinese have been learning about India for the last 2000 years. We haven't learned China. The Americans have try to learn the Chinese, and they are able to deal with the Chinese. Even Trump administration says, I have struck a deal with China on rare earth. So that means he is able to deal with China. He understands China. So we keep on talking about China, 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 all these things, but my understanding is that we do not have the art of dealing with China, which is not simply a political science or subject of international relations. Understanding China requires far more deeper understanding of their history, culture. Even if you know Sanskrit and Pali language, you will be able to understand China. Unfortunately, I do not speak Sanskrit. I do not know Pali. Chinese psyche is made out of Pali language. So, but
Oh,
how
that's
many
very
Indians
interesting.
speak Pali languages? Everything has been transliterated from Pali and Sanskrit into the Chinese language. So even if you know our own language, then you will be able to understand a little bit about China. So it's very complicated.
Do you think that India's policy on Tibet, giving refuge to the Dalai Lama, has worked to its advantage or not? Because in the world, we are seen as a country that has given refuge to a very progressive people.
I think we inherited Tibet problem from the British. British were not very clear. British accepted Tibet to be part of China. So I don't think Pandit Nehru could do much, but to go along with the British version of the Tibet policy, British Tibet policy. But if we had our own policy on Tibet, it was problematic because Tibetans have a claim in India, something like 10% of Indian territory. Barring Nepal, entire Himalaya has been claimed by Tibetan in 1947, in October, 2 months after our independence. By the time we could do something with Tibet, Tibet was occupied, and we were busy
Yes.
with war with Pakistan. There was a Kashmir problem, there were partition, all these things. We had no time to deal with Tibet. So I think we
Yeah.
landed up with the Tibet issue, and I don't think we had a original thinking on Tibet. Even if there is a geopolitical case for Tibet, Nehru never thought that Tibet has a political case. They thought it's a feudal state, refused to accept liberal ideas, reforms like India, like Indonesia, like Egypt. Dalai Lama is the age of that 1940s and the 50s product. But every leader of the 1950s and the 60s were progressive leader. Whether Nasir, whether Nehru, whether Suharto, all these people. But Dalai Lama was stuck in ancient times. He wanted that those, Lamaistic ideas to be continuing, and he was very comfortable with the imperialist Chinese. Dalai Lama is a problem between the imperial Chinese and the communist Chinese. Communist Chinese do not accept the feudal system of Tibet, whereas the previous rulers of Tibet, whether it was Kuomintang, whether they were Manchus, whether they were Ming dynasty, whether they were Yuan dynasty, they were all Buddhist kingdoms, Buddhist emperors. And Dalai Lama was very comfortable. They never had any problem with those emperors. It's only
No,
in
that's a very
1950.
interesting.
Yeah, 1915. Say, if tomorrow Communist Party doesn't exist in China or collapses, I think Dalai Lama will be very comfortable with a democratic China, because in a democratic China there is a space for Lamaism, for the Lamas, role for the Lamas to play, like the Taiwanese, like the Hong Kong or Macau or anything. They belong to the past imperialistic Chinese government, Sun Yat-sen, Kuomintang, or whatever that you want to talk. So His Holiness is product of that system. So it's a struggle between the Chinese imperialistic ideas or the capitalist, whatever those ideology, and the communist. It is not
That's
an
a very
issue
interesting take
yes,
on the
it's
issue.
not a it's not an issue. He is not an issue between India and China. He has landed up here partly because of the Americans. It is not in 1951. Preparation to bring Dalai Lama outside Tibet was going on since 1951 by the Americans and the CIA. These are all recorded. The US ambassador in Calcutta or in New Delhi was planning all this escape from Lhasa to India. That happened only in 1959 following the revolt in Lhasa. But the preparation was on. The original idea was to take him to Ceylon, to Sri Lanka.
I
Then he
see.
himself wanted to go to Burma. It didn't work out because the UNNU was not comfortable with Dalai Lama having in Burma. And he was also in talks with the Chinese on the border resolution between Burma and the Chinese. So the Burmese couldn't take him. So then he thought he will come to the southern Tibet, which is Tawang. But
Yes, he did
unfortunately,
come to Tawang.
we didn't let him to stay in Tawang. We brought
Hmm.
him to Missouri.
Yes,
So it's a circumstances. Nehru didn't want him, but then American imposed on us his presence here. So our chapter with Dalai Lama started in 1959. I think our history with Dalai Lama will end with the 14th Dalai Lama. I don't know 15th Dalai Lama. He will mature one day after 40 years or 30 years. But by that time, situation would have changed. You and me may not be even here on the earth. So
definitely not.
so
Yeah.
I think it's not a question of Dalai Lama. The issue of Tibet is going now. It's dying. Trump is not taking Tibet seriously. I don't see any editorial in except for last 2 days. Even the Indian media does not write anything on Dalai Lama. Rarely in the 60s and the 70s we had every second day there is an article in Times of India. Now you hardly see anything. He is not able to visit. So the issue is it's all right to say that Dalai Lama, whatever it is. If it comes into the diplomatic sphere of activities, then we have to take it very seriously. You have to defend Dalai Lama at every forum, whether it in SARC, whether it in BRICS, whether it in G7, like we defend Kashmir. So are we
Mr.
willing to do
Ambassador
that?
Stobdan, I've run completely out of time. So
Okay.
I just need, but it's a very, very interesting take on what was being said in the media about the Dalai Lama and the views that we all share. It's completely different from what we've heard so far.